Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be doing a slightly different type of video. Recently I did a video going through the history of piracy in One Piece and breaking down the different eras and generations of pirates. And while I was making that video, I realized it felt a lot like what fans often do for sports. If you like watching sports, you know fans like to talk about different eras and compare player resumes across different eras and so on. And to be honest, we have such a rich lore surrounding the pirates in One Piece and the great pirates of various eras that you could legitimately make a Hall of Fame for One Piece pirates and legitimately have a lot of criteria to go off and cases to make for a lot of different characters. Because this isn't like a lot of other series where the main things you can compare is, character strength. In One Piece, how great of a pirate you are means a lot more than that. There's a lot that goes into it. Obviously, part of it is how strong a given pirate is, but also what kind of crew or empire did they build, what did they accomplish, what kind of legacy did they leave behind, what kind of longevity did they have, what was their status in the world. There's so much stuff you could talk about when comparing how great one pirate is to another. Today I'm going to be doing a ranking of who, in my opinion, are the top 10 greatest pirates of all time. Now, before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you want more One Piece content like this in the future. So to start with, let me just make it clear that this is just my opinion. I know that we don't know a lot about the oldest generation of pirates. I have no idea how to compare someone like Silver Axe to Don Chinjiao, because we just don't know anything about Silver Axe beyond the fact that he was a notable member of the Rock's Pirates, and he possibly ended up as a zombie on Moria's crew. This is not the real world, this is not actual sports, I can't actually pull up stats and stuff on these figures. I'm going off what we know, a bit of speculation, and how I personally weight this vague idea of greatness among pirates in this fictional story. This is mostly for fun. I'm also very interested to hear how you guys would order things, so definitely let me know in the comments below. Now, before getting into the top 10, I'm going to give some honorable mentions. First up is Mihawk. The only reason I'm not putting Mihawk in the top 10 greatest pirates is because Mihawk, to me, is more so the world's greatest swordsman who happens to be a pirate. I think just the fact that he doesn't have a crew, he doesn't try to take territories, he doesn't even have a ship, makes him just a weird outlier to me. Because keep in mind, the world government is really loose with who they dub pirates. Like, Pedro was called a pirate when he was really just a scholar. For the world government, it's mostly people they don't like that seem, a little bit dangerous that just get dubbed pirate. And with Mihawk, I don't get the sense that he had any interest in typical pirate stuff. Be that, the good side, like going on adventures, or the bad side, like trying to gain power and plundering and stuff. I think he just cared about being a swordsman and fighting strong people, killing his boredom and such. And the world government saw a dangerous swordsman who wasn't a marine, so they called him a pirate. That's speculative, I know, but this is my list, and I'm just trying to keep it to what I view as a more classic piratey pirate in this series. Obviously, Mihawk is great. Oda even refers to him as a legend, but I just think he's a legendary figure who is technically a pirate rather than a legendary pirate, if that makes sense, my opinion. On the flip side, I also want to give Doflamingo an honorable mention. I think he definitely fits the bill for being a great pirate. He's even called the most dangerous man among the warlords a few times. He's definitely a pirate with a ridiculous amount of influence, as other pirates need him for supplies, and he also had dirt on the world government and could make them do stuff. Not to mention, he was very strong. Most fans would refer to him by, the fan term commander level, and he had a decent-ish crew. Overall, he was a pretty big deal in the current age, the great age of pirates. He didn't last through the new age, but it's just that I think everyone in the top 10 is an even bigger deal. Next honorable mention is Fisher Tiger. He was the greatest fisherman pirate as far as we know, which is kind of a big deal because he spawned several other fishman pirate crews, so he left a pretty big legacy behind. Not to mention, it sounds like the original Sun Pirates created a really big commotion in the world when they first got big, simply because it was fishermen rebelling against the world. Not to mention, he did one of the most legendary things in the series, which was climbing the Red Line with his bare hands to free all of the slaves there. That is the most Luffy-esque thing we've heard a pirate do that's not Luffy himself. Right? So, we're so used to Luffy doing these crazy things like, breaking into Impel Down, but what Fisher Tiger did was just as wild. Basically, Fisher Tiger, even if he wasn't necessarily that strong, at least he made huge waves in the world, and was pretty revolutionary, and he seems like the father of all modern-day fishermen pirates. Final honorable mention is going to go to my man, Captain John. Now, this is the weirdest honorable mention because we know the least about this guy, But hear me out, okay? The greatest, most famous known treasure in the One Piece world is the One Piece. The second greatest, most famous known treasure in the One Piece world is Captain John's treasure. So you can laugh, but what the hell did this guy do to accrue a treasure that is this famous? I would have kind of written it off as not that notable if not for the fact that Captain John was actually a notable name to come out of the Rocks crew. It's not like he's being mentioned first among, the famous Rocks members or anything like that, but he is mentioned as one of the more minor members who would go on to carve a name for himself, and it's one of several names that it seems like Sengoku expects people to recognize even decades later. So Captain John wasn't just some scrub who accidentally found a huge treasure. He was a notable pirate from Roger's era, which I talked about in my, eras of One Piece video, which I strongly recommend you watch before this video because it gives a lot of context to this. Roger's era seems to be clearly the strongest era so far, and out of all of the pirates of that era, Captain John managed to accrue a treasure that is considered to be really valuable today. That sounds like he was a very successful pirate for his time. Not like Yonko successful, but still enough that I think he should at least get an honorable mention. So, after all that, let's talk about the actual list. At number 10, I have Shiki. When Shiki was first introduced, a lot of people jumped to the assumption that he was one of Roger's greatest rivals, with some people even saying that he was the equivalent of, Eustace Kid to Roger. Now, this was mostly just a really reactionary take based on our very limited knowledge at the time of Roger's era. Shiki was just kind of the first pirate we heard of besides Whitebeard to have been around in that era. It wasn't even confirmed at that time that Kaido and Big Mom were also present back then. So because at one point all we knew of was Roger, Whitebeard, and Shiki, a lot of people assumed Shiki was a huge deal. Now over time we've learned more. In reality, it seems like there are countless pirates who went up against Roger and fell short. And I don't know how high Shiki would even rank among, the rivals of Roger that we even know of, because at this point we know Roger's been in conflicts with Rocks, Whitebeard, and Big Mom, so even among Roger's known rivals, Shiki's not even really at the top. And compared to other historically great pirates like, Rocks, Roger, Whitebeard, Kaido, Big Mom, etc., it's not like Shiki ever got to the top of the pirate world. Of course, Shiki must have been extremely strong considering he even gave, Garp and Sengoku a fight, but Shiki himself acknowledges that Roger was a wall that he could never overcome. And he also acknowledges that Whitebeard is the next greatest pirate and it's his era now that Roger's out of the way. So it's not like Shiki's ever putting himself in that conversation as the greatest pirate or it being his era. Like the Yonko today are all competing, they're all next in line for Pirate King. It's a four-way race at the top, or at least it would be if Shanks cared about it. But Shiki on the other hand, he was clearly a step below the greatest pirates of his time. So even at his peak, Shiki was never in contention, right? He was never quite at the top of the pirate food chain. And then if you look at longevity, he was only really prominent during Roger's era. Before that, he was a subordinate on Rox's crew, and his career ended when Roger's did. So he basically disappeared for the entirety of the next era, which was the Great Pirate Age. So the bottom line, Shiki, great pirate for his time, never really considered at the top of the pirate world the way Roger and Whitebeard were at that time, or the way the emperors are today. Plus, he doesn't have the longevity that pirates like Kaido and Big Mom have, who were major players across multiple eras. And just the biggest indicator to me that he shouldn't rank that high on the list of great pirates is when Sengoku was talking about the most legendary pirates who were part of the Rocks crew. He started with specifically Whitebeard, Kaido, and Big Mom first and foremost as the biggest names, and then Shiki was mentioned in the next secondary batch of the sort of also notable names. Though to be fair, Shiki was at least mentioned first out of this next group, and his silhouette at least got to be featured with the big names, though not as prominently. So basically the gist I got was that Shiki, yes, a great pirate, just a step short of the likes of Whitebeard, Kaido, and Big Mom. Now, I think this is the most controversial pick. We all know that Luffy is going to be number 1 by the end of the story, but to say Luffy right now should be number 9 ahead of Shiki might seem crazy to some people. So to be clear, again, this is not about strength. I know Luffy right now probably isn't as strong as Shiki, right? Actually definitely isn't. Like Prime, Garp, and Sengoku had to step out to handle Shiki. I also know that Luffy has only been a notable pirate for a couple years at this point. However, all that being said, I just think that what Luffy's achieved as a pirate at this point and the impact he's had in the world is unprecedented in so many ways that you could say his resume may have already surpassed Shiki's. I mean, Shiki's greatest claim to fame, for example, is actually that he was the only prisoner ever to escape from Impel Down. But Luffy has already done that in a much more dramatic fashion, basically breaking out the entire prison at once. Not to mention, Luffy is the only one to have broken into Enies lobby and gotten someone back on top of the Impel Down raid. On top of that, Luffy pretty much threw off the entire balance of the New World by defeating Doflamingo, which means Luffy is arguably the catalyst for the upcoming biggest war of all time. And Luffy is spearheading the start of the Wano conflict, which is supposedly going to turn into the next greatest battle since Marineford. And Luffy was even accidentally responsible for the formation of basically Rocks 2.0, as his actions brought Kaido and Big Mom together. So basically the ways Luffy has impacted the world and caused chaos in the established pirate order seems pretty unprecedented. Not to mention, some people at the very least are now calling him the 5th Emperor of the Sea. Meaning Luffy is currently considered the 5th greatest pirate in the world, and I guess a contender for the One Piece. The people that matter, of course, still don't consider him to have reached that top tier pirate status yet, as we see the Marines don't rank Luffy alongside the other emperors, and also other emperors don't really consider him an emperor. But still, I'm going to put Luffy past Shiki, though it's a tough call. Blackbeard is at number 8. Basically take Luffy's resume and just make it better in every way, and you have Blackbeard's resume. Yeah, he didn't break into Enies lobby, but he also broke into Impel Down, and more importantly, Blackbeard basically orchestrated the entire Marineford war. It wasn't like he had the entire thing, perfectly planned out, but most of the Marineford conflict was his doing. He killed Whitebeard, he caused the event that ended the previous era and started the new era, and honestly you could argue that if there was any clear winner of the Marineford battle, really it was Blackbeard. He got everything he wanted from that: the fruit, killing Whitebeard, and a powerful crew. As a bonus, he went on to defeat the remnants of that Yonko crew, Whitebeard's crew, afterwards. That being said, I think it's pretty clear that Blackbeard is the least significant of the 4 emperors at the moment. He's only just gotten into their ranks, his crew strength at the moment seems a bit sketchy, and at the very least, the way he speaks about Kaido and Shanks seems to indicate that he considers them to be stronger than him at the moment. Just looking at bounties, it's clear that there's a gap between him and the other emperors. I definitely think Blackbeard and his crew will become a much more significant threat by eating devil fruits, and that they will likely be making some very big moves soon that will raise him up on this list. I imagine Blackbeard will be easily top 5 or higher by the end of the story, but for now, he's at number 8. At number 7, we have Rayleigh. And this was the hardest to place. It's basically like, where do you rank Scottie Pippen? Right? Like, Roger was the one and only Pirate King, but then where does that put his right hand? And I'll say again, it's not about strength. I think it's entirely possible that Rayleigh, in his prime, might be stronger than some of the people ahead of him on this list. But Rayleigh was never a pirate captain himself. I considered making this ranking just of pirate captains so I wouldn't have to rank him, but you know what? If I have to rank him, I think 7 is just about right, and here's why. Rayleigh's legend and reputation is greater than many of the pirates ahead of him. Obviously pirates know him, right, like other pirates know him. We can see they view him as a legend just when his name is mentioned. We can see how the other supernova react to the idea of him. We can see how Kizaru respects him. We can even see Garp say that the Marines can't afford to go after 2 legends at the same time, meaning Garp is basically putting Rayleigh in the same category as Whitebeard in terms of being a living legend. But all that aside, right, really what the biggest testament to Rayleigh is in the story is actually just the Straw Hat Pirates' reactions. They all know Rayleigh. Think about how insane that is. Nami doesn't even know that Shanks is one of the 4 greatest pirates in the modern day. And it's likely none of the East Blue Straw Hats did, as it's never really come up amongst them. In fact, it's entirely possible that none of them besides Robin even knew of Kaido, Shanks, and Big Mom until Garp explained the 4 emperors concept to the crew. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on knowing who Whitebeard was, because it just seems like the name and symbol Whitebeard are recognized literally in all corners of the world. But still, the crew didn't know that Shanks was an emperor, and very possibly they didn't even know about the whole 4 emperor system or who the other 4 emperors are. So even the greatest pirates of today are not universally known by the average citizen. But supposedly literally everyone knows about Rayleigh. He's supposedly a name that everyone's heard of at least once. He's been in all of the books, etc., etc. Garp saying that Rayleigh is a legend, sure, that's big. But really, it's the fact that normies like Nami and Usopp are freaking out over the name Rayleigh that you know that this is one of the most legendary figures of all time. And it's not like Oda was just being inconsistent with the crew's general knowledge base. Like, he's shown us that there's levels to infamy. Like, not everyone necessarily knows about Shanks, but that same chapter we are shown that everyone knows about Dragon. Only Rayleigh has that same level of name recognition as Dragon does today, and Rayleigh has been retired for 20 years. So think about that. Now, I'm saying all that, so all of that should basically mean that I should rank Rayleigh like way higher, right? Like, why is he only at number 7? No, because ultimately he was not a pirate captain. A lot of his fame comes, secondhand from being a part of the story of the most famous pirate of all time. But Rayleigh himself never led a crew. He himself was never the top pirate of an era, or contending to be the top pirate of an era, because ultimately he was the subordinate to a greater pirate. So while I think he's easily clear of the characters below him, Shiki, a B-list rival to Roger, or Luffy and Blackbeard, 2 pirates who only just became emperors, I just can't put Rayleigh as a greater pirate than the next ones on this list, because even though it's not just about strength, it's also not just about fame. Now, these next 3 are pretty easy. From here on, I'm going to be talking about the emperors, and not like Blackbeard and Luffy, right? I'm talking about the OG emperors, the ones that ruled an entire era of piracy, which is, what we know of as the Great Age of Pirates, everything after Roger's death till the Battle of Marineford. Going back to the eras I talked about in my previous video, Rox was the boss of his era till Roger took him down, then Roger had his era, and then Whitebeard sort of had the next era, or he should have, but he kind of ended up sharing it with Kaido, Big Mom, and finally Shanks. Obviously that's because Whitebeard didn't care about being the king, but I'll talk about him later. The point is, these emperors, these 4 original emperors, basically shared the top of the pirate world. And that's carried over to this new era, the New Age, where at least Kaido, Shanks, and Big Mom have still retained their spots. Now, for characters like Luffy and Blackbeard, I had to talk a lot about, their specifics, their resumes, what they've done, but at this point with the Emperors, it's not the same because it just goes beyond that. Like, we haven't heard the details, we don't have the specifics of every little thing the Emperors did, but we have basically been told that they've had great feats and they've been in many great legendary battles over the years. Like, Shanks' duels with Mihawk were so epic that Whitebeard still remembers their fights years later. We know that 3 of the Emperors were part of the Battle of the God Valley, which was the greatest pirate battle ever. We know Kaido has fought the other Emperors and the Marines many times. We know that they've all fought with Whitebeard over the years in territory wars. Basically, we don't necessarily know all of the little details of what the Emperors did, but the vague facts we know about them suggest a very long history of very high-level battles and such, on a level probably well beyond anything Luffy or Blackbeard have done so far. And just in general, the title of Emperor of the Sea carries a ridiculous amount of weight. It basically means that you've pretty much gone past the idea of just being a pirate. Like, the world government still calls you a pirate, but it's at the point where you're more so a gigantic rival empire to the world government and to these other rival empires than anything else. Like, as we saw from Marineford, to be an Emperor of the Sea, like one of the OG Emperors of the Sea, means that the entire military organization of the Marines from across the globe have to come together to stop you. At least that's my takeaway for what it is for the original 4 emperors. I don't know if Blackbeard as a pirate, if he carries quite that much weight yet, where all of Marineford needs to, or like the entire Marines need to organize together to stop him. And we know that Luffy, as he is right now, definitely doesn't carry that much weight. Also, no disrespect to Rayleigh, but I'm not going to rank him as a pirate subordinate above these other pirate captains who have built empires that basically require a world war to deal with. The world government is terrified of the idea of just 2 of these emperors joining forces, because just 2 of them together could potentially be game over for the rest of the world. Now, I said all that about the emperors in general, so that I don't have to repeat it when I'm going through the other emperors I'm going to list. You get my point? Now, if we're talking specifically about Shanks, right, the simple fact that Shanks was part of this group of 4 pirates puts him clearly ahead of anyone else on the list so far. The only reason I have him the lowest out of the 4 emperors, it's kind of just splitting hairs over minor points. If you want to talk about strength or crew strength, sure, it's entirely possible Shanks and his crew are the strongest. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I'm not really going to go into that here, that's very speculative. Generally, I'll say that Shanks sounds like the most low-key of the 4 emperors. He makes the least waves, he tries to actually keep things in check. He's also the newest. He wasn't a great pirate during Roger's era the way, Whitebeard, Kaido, and Big Mom were. Now, Shanks did do something very special, which is he stopped the war at Marineford, the great era-defining event of the Great Age of Pirates, which is a huge, huge deal. He basically was the one who put a close to that era even if he wasn't involved for the majority of the event, but I'm still not going to put him above pirates who've been at his level for much longer. So stay tuned for the top 5 greatest pirates of all time coming out tomorrow. Like, comment below, and you can subscribe to make sure to catch the next one. And lastly, you can support me on Patreon to get my extended thoughts on this and all future topics.